Some of you will have already heard. I encourage you to go download the podcast and listen if you have not already. We had Donald Trump on Clay and Buck on the Friday edition of the program for substantial periods of time. A lot of news made there. I was just about to go in and check and see how many different outlets are covering what has been said on the Clay and Buck program about a variety of different topics. When I just went in fact, let me check right now and see on my Google alert. Right now we've got, not surprisingly, this great site called OutKick that is covering the Clay and Buck interview. Mediaite's got a story up. Headline, Trump goes off on backstabber George Clooney. Daily Wire, Trump suggests he and Biden take a cognitive test. ABC News, suspense builds around Trump's vice presidential pick. The Hill, Trump calls Clooney a backstabber. Trump on Raw story, Washington Examiner, all of these stories, Yahoo News in England. All of these places in the last hour have written stories about our interview, and I would imagine that there will be more and more of those stories that continue to come out as again, all of the stories are out there. I'll talk some about what Trump said, but I want to say right off the top, it's the weekend, and PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. With PrizePicks, you against the number. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 now that basketball basically is over. You still have men's basketball, women's basketball. You're soon to have the Olympics. You can play the Olympics on PrizePicks, and you can make up to 100 times your cash watching people out there continue to ball out. I've got picks for you that will be here in just a sec, but I want you to download the PrizePicks app today. Use my code OutKick for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code OutKick on PrizePicks. First deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Tonight's picks: 11-1 payout. I'm going to take a big swing here. Some might say that's nearly the literal truth of what I need. Tonight, the Braves, as they get ready for the start of the All-Star break, they didn't score last night, my Atlanta Braves. I think they're going to come out and put up some numbers tonight. In particular, I think Marcell Ozuna, who has been the best player for the Braves the first half of the season, is going to hit a home run. And I think Austin Riley is going to hit a home run. Big swing here. If I'm right, if both of these guys hit a home run, that pays off at 11-1. Let me repeat that. Ozuna to hit a home run, Austin Riley to hit a home run. If both of these guys hit home runs, you get a payoff of 11-1 on that outcome. 2 guys who've been hitting pretty well, 2 guys with significant long ball power, Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, both to hit home runs. Let's have some fun tonight. That pays off at 11-1. Use code OutKick at PrizePicks.com. Get up to $100 if you haven't already signed up. Okay, let's dive into the Trump interview. And I'm going to talk about the Biden presser, the Trump interview. I didn't see any of it live. I've seen a few clips. I'll talk to you about the ESPYs. All that to come here on the Friday edition of the program. And let me start with the Trump interview. There were several things that Trump said during the interview that I thought were interesting, and I flagged several of them. Trump said that he believed that Kamala would be an easier matchup in the presidential race than Joe Biden would be. Now, is it possible that's gamesmanship from Trump? Maybe. It's possible that he decided, you know what, I actually would rather go against Biden, and so I'm going to say Kamala would be even easier because the reality is I think Kamala is a stronger candidate. Is it possible, in other words, that he's playing the media, myself here, and many people out there by saying that he thinks the easier matchup is actually the harder matchup. That wouldn't be a huge surprise. That wouldn't be staggering if that was the choice that he was making. But Trump doesn't seem to do that a lot. For better or worse, he tends to tell you what he thinks. That's based on what I have found to be the case. And I've interviewed Trump now, like 9 or 10 times. I don't know that there's very many people out there who have interviewed Donald Trump more times than I have. We had him twice on OutKick the Coverage. We had him, my sports talk radio show. We had him on OutKick. We have had him on Clay and Buck 5 or 6 times, I think. I think we're getting close to basically 10 interviews, and a lot of those have been long-form interviews. We sat down with him in person at Mar-a-Lago twice, sat down with him at Bedminster, and I think have had him on at least 3 or 4 other times via phone like we did earlier today. And my point on saying that is I don't know how many people have interviewed him more than 9 or 10 times like I have. I think I've got a decent sense for him based on all of these interviews over the years. I think he's being honest. I think he believes, based on the data that he's seen, that Biden does better than Kamala. If that's true, then Democrats shouldn't make a change. My analysis would be that depends. And you say, okay, what do you mean by if the choice is between Biden and Kamala to run against Trump, what do you mean by that depends? The way I would analyze it is this way. I would say Biden's ceiling is basically set, but so is his floor. That is, the range of potential outcomes for Joe Biden is not that substantial. He's a known quantity. I think Biden's ceiling is below where Kamala Harris's ceiling is. That is, if Kamala Harris came in like a house on fire, started dominating, I think she could motivate younger voters. I think she could motivate minority voters. I think she could motivate female voters. Best case scenario for Kamala is better than the best case scenario, I think, for Biden. But the worst case scenario for Kamala, I think, is substantially below the worst case scenario for Biden. So to what extent are you looking for a proverbial game changer? To what extent do you want to take a risk? And let me give you an analogy I love. When you have a young player in college football, I don't remember who the first coach who said this, who it was, but he said, he's a guy that's going to make the band play. The problem is you don't know whether it's going to be your band or their band. That is the range of potential outcome when you're a young player and you have a lot of talent is you might come out and throw 3 touchdowns and win the game for your side. You might also throw 2 pick sixes and fumble twice and the other team wins entirely because of your mistakes. That to me is Kamala Harris. She's an unknown quantity. Ceiling is higher. She could be better than Biden. Floor is lower. She could be much worse. I don't know which Kamala we would get. My indication is that I think probably Biden's going to lose. Kamala could win. So if I were making a decision, I probably would roll with Kamala Harris. But I think it's a really interesting question to contemplate there in terms of how you think it exactly would break down. Okay, so that's one analysis, one answer from Trump. I also thought that Trump saying he actually defended Biden a little bit because I asked him about Barack Obama and Joe Biden. He said they hate each other. And I do think there's some truth there. They're definitely frenemies. But he said about George Clooney that he was a backstabber, third-rate actor, and that he actually felt like Biden was the wronged party based on the fact that George Clooney shows up 3 weeks ago for a fundraiser, says, hey, Joe Biden, you should be the president of the United States. Next thing you know, he's writing an editorial for the New York Times demanding that Biden step down and there be a new competition. I thought that was somewhat interesting that Trump actually defended Biden, who he said I'm no great fan of, but I did feel, I'm speaking as Trump now, Trump said that he believed George Clooney was a backstabber and also very disloyal. Then Clark Gable, he's not. He also criticized the ability of George Clooney to move from television to movies, which I also thought was pretty funny. Then I got into, and there was a lot. I would encourage you guys to go listen because there was a lot there. Trump said that he and Biden should both have cognitive tests, that he would be happy doing it on television. I asked Trump whether or not he felt, given in my opinion, that he had knocked out Joe Biden, whether he thought there should be a second debate. He said he did, and that he was going to debate Biden. I said basically I thought Trump was Mike Tyson and that Biden was Leon Spinks, and that usually in a boxing match when you get knocked out, you don't get an immediate rematch. Usually you get a rematch if it goes to the judges, if there's some dispute about who actually won. That's when you need to have a rematch. Trump said he thought they owed it to the nation to have another debate, which is right now, by the way, set for September 10th. And so I thought that was interesting because Trump basically is saying, yeah, I'm going to debate him, even though Trump now is in the lead, and theoretically Biden has more to gain from that debate than Trump would. Trump said, I dove into the question of the golf challenge. Remember, initially it was Joe Biden who went on and challenged Donald Trump to a golf match. Trump then accepted the challenge, came back and said, I'll give you 20 strokes, 10 on each side, and I'll give you $1 million if you beat me. And I asked Trump what he thought Joe Biden would shoot, and he said, I don't believe he could break 150, which is, pretty big indictment of Joe Biden's golf game that Trump said, I don't believe based on, I don't believe he could break 150. And Trump said he based that on having seen Biden's golf swing. So that in and of itself, I thought was very interesting. I encourage you, go check out the Clay and Buck podcast. If you have not already subscribed, you can go listen to that at your leisure. Also, it's up at clayandbuck.com. You can go there and press play. Also, let's say you're watching me right now and you're thinking to yourself, you know what I need? I need more Clay Travis video in my life. Now, certainly I would understand if many of you are saying, I actually need less. I wish I didn't have to look at you as much as I do. I understand. Trust me. My wife probably agrees. But if you want video, they stream now the video 2 different ways that you can subscribe online. You can go subscribe at clayandbuck.com, and you can watch all 3 hours of our radio show, the video version of it. Or you can go to foxnation.com. If you're a Fox Nation subscriber, they stream all 3 hours of the radio program at Fox Nation as well. So in addition to the 500 AM, FM stations, the millions of downloads that are taking place every single month, you also, for the last 6 months or so, I think is the math. I think it's the last 6 months or so. I think it's since the start of the year, have been able to watch 3 hours of the video, as many of you are doing, at clayandbuck.com, also at foxnation.com. 2 different ways in addition to all the radio and all the podcasting options. You can now subscribe there as well. Okay, couple of other things that are out there. What did I think of Biden's performance? I sat and watched the entirety of his press conference yesterday. I thought it was utterly mediocre. Obviously, we had Biden refer to Zelensky as Putin. He referred to his vice president, Kamala Harris, as Trump. Trump talked about that in the interview with us. Regularly, Biden did what Biden does, trailed off responses by just saying anyway, no actual conclusion to a thought. He randomly decided to whisper into the microphone. Alternatively, he decided to talk really loudly. None of it seemed to be connected to anything. He also continues with this ridiculous cough, which he can't seem to lose for some reason. It was a thoroughly awful press conference. The standard for Biden press conferences in the wake of the June 27th debate is basically if he doesn't die on the stage, Democrats pronounce it a success. And so I actually thought the biggest winner was Trump. and the biggest winner was the Republican Party. Because what's happening there and what you're seeing is he totally and completely was mediocre. Nobody out there was like, you know what, that was a killer performance. He convinced me that his debate performance was an outlier and that he's perfectly fine. And nobody was saying, hey, you know what, that was worse than the debate. There is no way he can continue to be president of the United States. It was actually smack dab in the middle. Nobody got what they really wanted. And I think that end result is it prolongs this story. It leads to a continued discussion about whether or not Biden should be the nominee. I actually think that Biden is benefiting by reaching this weekend because starting Monday, the attention to a large extent will shift to the Republican National Convention. I actually think the RNC should just cancel its convention. I'm going to be there. What do they have to gain? As long as the story is the Democrat Party infighting and Joe Biden lighting himself on fire and Democrats trying to replace Joe Biden as the nominee, why in the world would Republicans want to step in and provide a challenge to that narrative? It just doesn't make any sense at all to me. And so I think that is worth asking that question. But to me, the middle ground here, the squishy middle, where nobody's like he was great and nobody's like he was truly awful because of the limited level of performance that is necessary to exceed the hurdle of acceptability. As long as he reached it, then we're kind of still stuck where we are. And I think that's good for Trump, and I think that's bad for Biden. And this story I would encourage you to pay attention to because I do think it's significant. The New York Times is reporting that $90 million in pledged donations is being withheld as long as Joe Biden is actually the nominee. If this is true, and again, it's a New York Times report up at NewYorkTimes.com right now, that many of the big dollar donors are saying, hey, I'm not going to give money as long as Biden is the nominee. This is the proverbial nut-cutting moment, because if the top donors will not give money to Biden because they believe he's going to lose, then it becomes more difficult for him to run his campaign. Remember, Biden so far has spent way more money than Trump has. Trump now, according to the most recent dollar figures I have seen, has more cash on hand than Biden does. Biden's been spending money hand over fist, and his poll numbers haven't really been moving. Now, suddenly, you're going to have Trump able to come in and start spending money, too, over the next several months. And as that happens, I think Biden's in potentially a really dangerous spot because he's been spending money and losing ground. Now he may have a challenge actually getting all that money, getting his hands on all that money. And if that is true, he's in a potentially very dangerous and precarious situation. So something to pay attention to as it pertains to the dollars out there. The other thing I want to say about the presser, I was really disappointed, and some of you are going to say, why would you even have high expectations for the media at the press conference? First of all, Biden came out with his usual list of all the media people that he was going to call on. They effectively were state-sponsored media that have been pre-approved. I think you should not sign up and be a part of this shenanigans when Biden himself has nothing to do with who's asking questions, where I think it's very likely that Biden already knows what the questions are going to be. It doesn't add up to me that you would be willing to do this as part of the White House press corps. But, man, it was embarrassing how bad so many of the questions were. A lot of the questions were designed to just allow 8 or 9 minute soliloquies, and many of them had nothing to do with the issues that Americans actually care about. I understand that NATO matters. I understand that foreign affairs matters. This is not one of those times where if you're a member of the press, what people care about is what Joe Biden thinks about Ukraine, or what Joe Biden thinks about NATO, or what Joe Biden thinks about Vladimir Putin or anyone else right now. It's about domestic politics and whether he has the mental faculties to remain president of the United States. And I actually thought the questions were really poor. And it further elucidates for me what I've said about press conferences for a long time. Whoever the smartest questioner is, everybody else should deputize that person and let them ask every question. I've said this for a long time about things that don't matter. I've done SEC Media Days. I think next week is SEC Media Days, where you have to sit around and watch somebody get a question and they ask the question and it's totally worthless and it just eats up substantial amounts of the press conference time. I would rather have whomever the best and smartest and brightest and most skilled at asking questions is in the White House press corps be in charge of asking every question at a press conference. I think you'd get better results there. 90%, I think, of all media shouldn't have jobs. They don't provide anything of value. They basically rewrite what has already been written before. They don't actually provide any substantial impact from what has actually taken place. So that is just something to think about. Speaking of media, one of my guys, Bobby Barak, just texted me that the leading story, one of the leading stories right now at NBCnews.com is talking about our interview with Trump and who he's potentially going to consider at VP. And I should have said, certainly one of the big takeaways from that interview was that Trump said he's VP is down to 4 or 5. And he said the final 4 were Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, Tim Scott, and J.D. Vance. Now, he said 4 or 5 and then gave us 4 names. So maybe there's a 5th name out there. Maybe he's just playing the game a little bit. But he told us that he was likely to announce next week, either on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, who his vice president was going to end up being. So I was just disappointed in the media. I think the Democrats were in an interesting spot. You may have just seen me talking about this on Fox News with Martha McCallum, where Republicans in general, I think, want Biden to do well enough to remain the nominee. And I think Republicans in general during that press conference yesterday wanted Biden to not fall completely flat on his face so that he remains the nominee. And then on the flip side, I think Democrats actually wanted the media to fillet him and end up in a situation where he was not actually still the nominee. And instead, as I said, we ended up kind of in that interregnum area where neither side is particularly happy. Finally, I wanted to talk about this. And by the way, I'm going to be on Sean Hannity tonight, or at least I'm scheduled to be. So my diet of daily media not over yet. But I didn't watch any of it. Last night was the ESPYs. And I know most of you probably didn't watch either. But I saw they had Serena Williams and Venus Williams out on the stage. And the ESPN writers, I'm presuming that these are the people who come up with the jokes, made a joke in quotation marks, because it wasn't actually very funny, at Kansas City Chief kicker Harrison Butker's expense. They tried to make fun of him because he had the gall, the audacity, the temerity to come out and say, hey, women, as well as men, by the way, he said, probably what you're going to find yourself most proud of is becoming a mother, becoming a father, taking care of your family, no matter what other worldly success you might have. And I said at the time, I don't understand why this is controversial. The thing that I am most proud of is not anything that I've done in my professional career. It's my 3 boys. And they are the things that matter the most to me. And if you told me tomorrow, hey, you have to give up all your money, all your fame, to the extent that I have any, all of your professional success, but your boys are going to be happy and healthy in life, I would do it. And I'm not even exaggerating about that. And so I don't understand why what Harrison Butker said was remotely controversial. And I said at the time, as I always do, hey, maybe go listen to the whole thing in context, which I took the time to do, in the same way that I'll tell you, hey, when a Supreme Court opinion comes out, go read it yourself. Don't listen to people talking about it, many of whom have not actually read the opinion that they're opining on. The bare minimum that you should do if you're in the media ecosystem is actually read the original documents, watch the interviews, actually do your homework so you can react honestly to something as opposed to reacting to the reaction, which is often what happens in the media. I didn't see anything remotely controversial about what Harrison Butker said. And I certainly continue to slam home Harrison Butker would have been far less criticized if he had been arrested for beating his wife, if he had been arrested for alleged sexual assault, than he has been for saying get married and have kids. And I think it's instructive of where we are that ESPN, which is totally tone deaf when it comes to what sports fans actually want, would decide with Harrison Butker in the crowd that day, I'm told, yesterday, that they were going to make fun of him for talking about how proud of his family he is and how responsible as a father he feels to make sure that his family is successful and how much he loves his wife and absolutely is in awe of what she has done to create the family that they both share. The fact that Harrison Butker is a bad guy says far more about our failure as a society than it does anything at all about him. And also, it speaks to how ESPN does not represent the average sports fan, that they would joke about this and that they would try to mock and ridicule him for saying, hey, I believe in a strong family, and then tell him he's not allowed to watch women's sports because of it. Again, it's embarrassing. ESPN should be ashamed. There are a lot of ESPN employees who know better, and they all shut up and didn't say a word when that attack happened. All right. I love all of you. I will be in Milwaukee on Monday. I cannot wait. Looking forward to getting up there. We're going to have a lot of tremendous guests. If you didn't already, encourage you to go listen to my interview with Donald Trump. This has been OutKick, the show.